Biology 30 online. So this is the anytime course. Of course, you're taking this course because you want the most flexibility possible. For many of you, your classmates are very similar to you, just because I've taught this for a while and met a lot of folks. You're working full time, you're busy parents, you're busy for many other reasons. Just don't have time to come to a class that starts exactly at 8 a.m. and runs Monday to Friday. The good news about the course, and it's put this simply, and I think I've mentioned this in the welcome email and stuff. The good news is the course works. So like any course, you need to put work in. I mean, that's a no-brainer. We all know that, if we're in a course, we're about to, to have to put some work out. But that's also something I know from all of the students I've met. I know how hard you guys work. I know you're working full time, and then plus you start being students, and I know, frankly, you all work your tails off. And I'm very honored to work with you, frankly, because you guys are awesome. So I needed to let you know that. So the course works. The process works. Lots of folks have gotten really good marks with this course. Lots of folks. And it does start with these student notes and really following this process. Read stuff, watch stuff, do the practice questions, take your own notes. Actually, just before I started the recording, one of your classmates was talking about that, how she's been taking notes and all that. Actually, two of them mentioned that already. So I did want to start. If there's any questions, I actually have a plant. One of your classmates asked this question before I started the recording. So are there any questions? And maybe Joanne, you could ask yours. Thanks, Joanne.
Okay, so yeah, the question that I asked earlier is about the midterm exam, and you know how there's no set schedule to take it. So basically, what I asked is how it's going to happen.
Exactly. Great question. Very common question. So what you'll all notice is we've got kind of a plan for you. You don't have to follow it, obviously, but it's a good idea to follow as close as you can. So about 3 weeks to do Unit 1. You might have noticed the Unit 1 notes, and I'll be going over some of those. There's about 67 pages. So if I divide 3 weeks, and I say 3 weeks is maybe 14 kind of working days, right? Because 1 day for the exam, and you'd probably take more than 1 day for the exam. But if I take 14 days and divide it by 67, it's about 5 pages a day. So that tells me about how long, or how much to work through this. Again, that would take about 3 weeks. 2 weeks for Unit 2, following that same process. By this point, you've got our court, you know what you're doing. You're going through notes, you're taking our self-test, you're studying, you're doing the unit test. So 2 weeks for that next unit, then 2 weeks again for Unit 3. So if you add that up, that's 3 plus 4, what's that, 7? So in about your 8th week, at the end of your 7th week is when you do your midterm. Take a look at when you started the course. Put a date on your calendar right now, or after this session, and okay, this is when I'm going to do my midterm. And then you might as well plan out the rest of your course as well. You do have up to 20 weeks, and you'll find that this is going to get you done in about 16 or 17 weeks. So in other words, there's some flexibility. If you really need, guys, you can apply for a 4-week extension. You could have up to 24 weeks. Now, don't worry about doing that now, obviously. And in fact, we tell you, don't even do your extension until your 18th week. But it's just so you can kind of plan it out, right, on your calendar and go, okay, yeah, I want to take 20 weeks for this thing. And so I'm going to spend 3 days or 4 days studying for the midterm. You probably don't need to really study for the midterm more than 3 days, really, right? Like, I mean, you can definitely take more time if you want. And, but yeah, Joanne, did that kind of answer that question? How to get ready for the midterm, or when it is?
Yeah, it did. And
Great.
I have
Yep.
another question regarding the 4-week extension.
Yep.
Do we have to enroll to that through like enrollment or student navigator, or do we just talk to
And
you?
and there's a link right here. Again, none of us here are going to have to worry about this right now, but the link is right here, and it's actually quite easy. In your 18th week, you just send an email, and it's very easy to do. But another great question, but luckily none of you really have to worry about it right now. The other thing I remember, Joanne, you and I were chatting about was, so how does it work, Phil, when I'm ready for my midterm? Just email me and say, hey, Monday at 2. We do have a fellow available to help us out run midterms. usually 7 p.m. Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, sometimes Thursday night. So that might be available. So that might be what you want to kind of shoot for your midterm, is to do those I know that's not a perfect time, but it might be. And again, if things are tough and you can't make that, just let me know. But I'm going to start going over Unit 1. I've got the notes up right here. I'm actually just using kind of a picture of the notes, and definitely feel free to let me know. You can take the audio and ask any questions, just like Joanne did. And thanks, by the way, Joanne, for doing that for us. I've got the text chat right there on my left. So if you put something in there, I might not see it. Just say, hi, Phil, I have a question. It's in the text chat, right? Or even what you can do in the text chat, and let's test this out right now. Can everybody hear me? Just type a Y for yes. Let's see who's first, by the way, in the text chat. So come on, let's see how fast you are. Look at this, look at this. First place, second place, third place. Unfortunately, I have no prizes for you. Sorry, I ran out, I ate them all. They were cookies and I baked them a week ago. So I don't know if that helps you at all. So yeah, again, if you got a question, you could put it there. I might not see it. That's why you'd go into the audio and say, hey, Flintstone, I got a question. Unit 1 overview. I talked about a few things in general, and again, it works. You know, read, watch the videos, make your own notes, take the self test. That'll give you a really good idea. It's for marks, but it's for less marks. But let's look at some specifics. I also did mention, yeah, there's about 67 pages, so it's about 5 pages a day you want to go through. But you know, some days you might do more, some days you might do less. You're always going to need to review stuff. It's not as if you read something and it sticks, right? I mean, we all know that, right? Like, you got to look at it again, you got to watch a video on it, you got to think about it, you got to draw a little picture. Guys, your brain needs you to basically read stuff at least a couple times. Usually you need to see something up to 7 times. It doesn't mean you read it 7 times, but it means you read it, then you kind of, you looked at some pictures, you watched a show, then you maybe read it again, you did your own notes, right? If you do some of that stuff over and over, what your brain actually goes is, oh, this is important. Because I know we all know this. In our modern world, there is so much information. Our brain has learned to ignore it all. Luckily, because it's all so important, isn't it? All that stuff about the famous people and I don't know, just lots of trivia. So yeah, so that's really what you're doing, is you're keying your brain and saying, hey, this stuff's important. Like, yeah, the entertainment tonight I watched last night was cool, but that's not important. This and the Oilers game was interesting, but that's not really important. I don't care that the score was 4-2 and Connor scored 100 points or whatever. Although that's pretty neat. But still, it's telling your brain, hey, this stuff's important. So you read it, you slow down, you think about it. Ultimately, it's understanding neurons. If I was going to say one thing about this unit, understand a neuron. I mean, understand how big they are too, right? Like a cell. Bloop. If I plunk out a hair, I'm not going to do that because I don't have many left. If I plunk out a hair, a single hair, about 10 neurons would fit across. So you can't see them. And they're that small, right? In our brains, there's about 86 billion. Those are interneurons, by the way. I'm sure you might have already read that there's 3 major types of neurons. There's the sensory neurons. There's the interneurons in our brain or in our spinal cord. And then there's the motor neurons. Ultimately, what this is in any science course is about taking information, apply it to yourself, apply it to what you know, right? It's literally, again, how we learn. Well, we do stuff over and over. That helps us learn, but also connect it to what you already know. Connect it to yourself, especially this course. This is about your health, the health, if you've got kids or if you've ever seen a kid, the health of kids, the health of, any of your partners or any of your friends, health of family members. It's very easy to personalize this course. And many students are always reporting to me, oh yeah, when I read about this certain disease or condition, my mother has that, or, my uncle had it, or whatever. It's a really good way to learn this stuff because it's real, right? So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight right there at the beginning of the course, understanding what a neuron is. I'm going to flip this about page 4 or 5. And I was just talking about this. Sense the types of neurons, and the concept of what's called a reflex arc, right? And the reflex arc is a model, an example of how our nervous system works. And ultimately, any science course, okay, it's not only studying stuff over and over, right? Like I said, it's not only connecting stuff to your experience, because that's the only way we learn. We build off of what we already know. We could never learn, if I start talking another language, probably that's not going to help. So you always build off your experience. Third thing, in science, it's about systems. It's about understanding, how the whole system works. So, hey, we all have a human body, and we've all, looked at things. We've all heard things. We've all, touched a hot stove, I'm sure, right? And you just suddenly move away. That's a reflex arc, right? So we've all experienced much of this stuff. So we can already build off our experience. And when we're learning about a system, there's always little parts that then work together to move my arm, right? So, and this isn't super hot, it's just my finger. But if this was super, super hot and I touch it, I'll just naturally pull away, right? Like we've all experienced that. That's a reflex arc. And it goes sensory neuron, interneuron, motor neuron. Boom, boom, boom. Now, here's the cool thing in a reflex arc. The decision to move, I mean, think about it. Do you think that decision to move your hand goes all the way up to your brain, and then your brain goes, oh, my finger is burning, I think I should move it, right? That decision does not go all the way up to your brain. That's why it's called a reflex. It still goes to the interneurons, in other words, in the brain or spinal cord. It goes to the spinal cord specifically, and the spinal cord actually does the thinking. It is a reflex. It's not as if it kind of ponders. It doesn't kind of go, I wonder, maybe it's not that hot. Maybe this will be okay. No, it's kind of an all or nothing, especially with a reflex arc. Essentially, you just move. And then the message gets to your brain. By the time you've moved your hand is when you suddenly go, oh, that was really hot. And that was a silly thing. I should always look, I don't know if you've ever done that. I just about did it. I just about walked into a room and literally leaned on top of a hot burner, but I noticed it. So that would have, required a large reflex arc to happen. So totally understanding these types of neurons, how they work together in the system for basically a reflex, but that'll also tell you how the whole system works, right? I mean, yes, it's not a reflex if you and I decide to, to pick up a pencil, but there's still going to be sensory neurons, right, involved with the eyes. But then, in our hands here, sensory neuron, and then an interneuron also then, giving me instructions. Okay, just hold it with these three, and because it's up in the brain. But then sending a message to the motor neuron. Okay, you 3 fingers, grab it. Okay, keep the pinky up. I have no idea why I'm holding the pencil like this, but this is what my brain's telling me to do. So basically, yeah, that whole system going on. What else we got here? Yeah, so that's about page 4 or 5. I'm just going to kind of keep going through stuff. Also be wary of time because I know I want to use our time efficiently here. The course is full of this. You've probably already seen it. It's okay if you haven't yet, where you're reading information and then there's a sample question and a video where we explain the question. I'll give you a little hint. Some of our questions, they're going to look super familiar to you when you do our tests. So that's a tiny hint. And definitely in the text chat, let me know if that's good to know. Just also that allows me to know that the system's still working and you can hear me. So if you think that's good to know, just let me know. Maybe say a yes in the text chat that indeed these videos, good idea to go through these practice questions because you might see them or something very much like them again. Okay, I see some folks typing. Perfect. I know you can still hear me, which is good. Yeah, I mean, because you're going to want to wonder. You're reading it. You're going, but what are they going to ask me? Can I answer what they're going to ask me? This will almost and sometimes actually show you what we're going to ask you, and so that you're ready for it, right? I mean, that's you expect that. You want to learn stuff, you think it's cool, but it's also okay. So, what you gonna ask here, buddy? um, so yeah, that was some sample questions we were just looking at. Structure of the neuron. So yeah, talking about the neuron again, super important. I mean, if there was one thing, and there's more than one thing to know for this unit, but if there was one thing to know, it would be the neuron, and as much detail about the neuron as possible. I mean, not only its structure, but it starts with knowing some of the key parts. The axon, that's what actually conducts the impulse. Neurons are set to fire. They're set to have an impulse. That's what neurons do. That's, when we're touching that hot stove, first the sensory neuron says, hey, there's a problem, and it fires a message to the interneuron, which says, yeah, that's a problem, and it fires a message to the motor neuron, and the motor neuron moves whatever muscles are required, right, to get us out of the way. Ultimately, in that case, that was 3 neurons, but the message is traveling down the axon of each, essentially, right? This structure here, the myelin sheath. Now, not all neurons have a myelin sheath on them. You've heard this before, I'm almost certain. There's gray matter and white matter. Now, the gray matter has no myelins, and we have neurons with no myelins. And the white matter is neurons that are myelinated. The myelination is an insulation. So just like real wires, and wires are conducting electricity, so it's similar to what your neurons are doing. Your neurons are conducting electrochemical. It's still electricity, but it's electrochemical, but it can be picked up, when we're doing we're checking a heartbeat, beep, beep, or we're doing an electroencephalograph, and you see those lines. Maybe it's a lie detector test, and it's the X-Files or something, which isn't true, by the way, or most of the shows, or all of the shows. But anyway, we give off electrical signals, electrochemical signals. It's coming from our neurons. The myelin sheath, just like on a real wire, if we insulate it, it'll travel better, right? Also, it protects the wire. So that's really what the myelin sheath does. Now, here's the cool thing that we all know. Maybe in the text chat, if you can just let me know, and it's okay if it's yes or no, but I'm sure all of us have tried to either learn a sports skill, learn a dance perhaps, or learn a musical instrument. You probably all of us have tried to do at least one of those things. And essentially when you're doing that, and especially for those of you who then got good at either dancing or the sports skill or the musical instrument, when we first start, we're kind of clumsy, right? But as we get better, as we practice more, what actually happens, the myelin sheaths get thicker, and they get better and better. We get better and better at whatever, at skating, at juggling, at some kind of dance move, maybe a line dance. I don't know, and that's just kind of how it actually works. So again, this is actually relating, what we're talking about to what you've all experienced, and even if we haven't really done a lot of dancing or sports or played musical instruments, we can all appreciate when we watch somebody who's really skilled do something, right? Or listen to a piece of music or whatever, and just go, oh, man, how's that person play a piano like that? Well, it's because the myelins, so on their motor neurons, it just, totally, it's really thick. It's a very good insulation. The transmissions are super fast, and they can just do it in their sleep. And in fact, people who do, sports skills or dance skills or whatever over and over, they can just do it in their sleep, right? Which also tells us something about studying, right? The more you study, like it gets to a point where you just, stuff, you know it just like your name or your address. And the beautiful thing with a course like this, because this information is so helpful, it'll get like that for you. A lot of this information in the course, you'll just start to know it. You'll go, oh yeah, I know that. That's cool. Okay, so that's on the structure of a neuron. That's about page 9. Couple key parts: the axon and myelin. Let's look at the action potential itself. So the actual impulse. So the action potential, and that's a key word, by the way. So potential. So all neurons have the potential to fire, right? Now, if you think about it, you could be, someone could touch you with a feather or whatever and you wouldn't feel it, right? But, someone brings along, something sharp or whatever, a pokey pencil or something here. It's in all likelihood, my neurons are going to fire. I'm going to say, oh, something's poking me, or oh, something poked me really hard. So ultimately, they need a certain level of stimulation to fire, to send a signal. And, this is, of course, like a drawing or an animation, if you like. I mean, it's not an active animation. But what you can see here is the wave of positive ions flowing through the neuron. So again, remember how small these are. Here's the cool thing. The axons can actually be very long. They can be a couple centimeters, 10 centimeters. Some of the axons are actually, they're super thin, but they're like a meter long. And that's pretty cool, right? That message could be traveling, through down our arm or whatever, just, and then finally get down to the finger. But the point being how that travels. Think of it like a bunch of dominoes, right? Let's say, and in our mind, let's set up a bunch of dominoes, right? So you're setting up dominoes. That takes energy, right? That's the potential. There's potential energy. What's happening is these positive ions, and you'll read about this, but the neuron is pumping sodium ions out and actually potassium in. And, you'll read more details and get all of that. But ultimately, sodium and potassium are changing places, and or the dominoes are falling down, right? So something stimulates that neuron and the dominoes start falling. But here's the cool thing that you've never seen. You've never seen dominoes fall and then stand back up again, right? Has anyone ever seen that? I mean, maybe just, and thanks, by the way. I see Joanne's, it was maybe a while ago. Wow, I didn't know that. And thank you for that, because I love that. But has anyone, so if someone's seen this, definitely let us know in the comments. But I'm assuming everyone's going to say no here. Has anyone seen dominoes fall and then stand back up? Maybe let's see a few no's, because I assume most folks have never seen that phenomena. If you have, I'd like to know where you've been to see that kind of a phenomena. That'd be kind of impossible, Joanne says. So I like that. Yeah, just kind of impossible. And, in fact, if we saw it, we'd assume, okay, what's the trick? Am I on candid camera or something? Like, am I going to win a prize here? And Karina, thanks in the chat as well for letting your colleague there know. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's always good to have a bit of engagement, right? And I appreciate that. So yeah. Yeah, again, a reverse video. So Dilpreet points out, sure, we could create a deep fake or whatever. We could do some special effects. I mean, that's ultimately what they're always doing there in the special effects. They're defying gravity, and they sometimes just run a video backwards and make us all think, oh, how'd that guy do that? Well, they just ran the video backwards. Point being, back to the point, it took a little energy to get the sodium ions, and it is sodium ions outside here, out, to pump them out. They are just waiting like a rubber band. So stretch a rubber band, and they're just waiting. They're waiting to be stimulated. They'll fall in, but then they'll be pumped right back out, literally in milliseconds. Literally in milliseconds they'll be pumped back out, and the neuron will be ready again, right? I mean, that's so cool too, right? And ultimately the cell, the neuron, that's the functional unit. That's the smallest part of your nervous system. So understanding the system, we start with the neuron. Yeah, neuron's important. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we looked at the action potential. Yeah, like falling down. What do I want to show you here? I'm gonna go right here. Oh, the action potential itself. This graph. I'll go over here. This is again in our notes. Let's see, zoom out, just make sure to find the right page. Come on, computer, don't be so slow, so slow. There it is, yeah. So this graph right here, this is really important to understand. We might have some questions for you on this graph, yeah, there'll be something to do with this graph question-wise, possibly even for both the midterm and this unit. Definitely, this is an important concept. So this is off of about page 11. Actually, no, this is page 13, sorry. So this is key to understanding the action potential. Really, there's two key parts here, right? This is when the dominoes are falling. The sodium floods into the neuron, then it reverses and we pump out potassium, and that kind of makes sense. Oh, it goes back to positive, because remember, it had to be positive on the outside, negative on the inside. We've actually measured this number. I know you're going to go like, what do these numbers even mean? This is from research done like 60, 70, 80, 90 years ago. I'd have to check how long ago, but a while ago, not last week anyway. So research done a while ago on squids, and because they have giant neurons. So the giant squid has giant neurons essentially, or maybe they're not giant squids. Anyway, they're big squids, like, they're like a meter long or whatever, these creatures. So we can study their neurons because their neurons are really big. And so in studies of their neurons as a model, right? So they're a model for us, and ours are the same. Just ours are, they're human neurons, but they work exactly the same as a squid neuron. That at rest, they're at -70, so they've got a highly negative charge, and then basically then they depolarize. So right here, these are the two parts to an action potential: depolarization and repolarization. And then you'll notice this is really cool too here, right? How it gets so negative, basically the potassium flowing out, so it loses all these positive charges, and it actually overshoots. It becomes hyperpolarized, so even less than 70. That makes sure, first of all, think of the dominoes, right? So we stimulate, we go past a threshold here, and we stimulate the neurons. So, we're kind of poking away, and finally Phil goes, okay, I can feel it. And so, we finally hit that threshold, the neuron fires, and then what happens here in the overshoot or the hyperpolarization is this makes sure that the message doesn't go backwards on the neuron, because the system wouldn't work, first of all, because in theory the message could go backwards, but it doesn't, like, virtually ever. Obviously, there's examples of that, because like in any rule I give you in biology, there's an exception. But this is a pretty big, solid rule that is rarely broken, that a neuron's not going to fire in reverse, because it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't send the message if it fired in reverse. The other thing this prevents is it from just basically twitching and just, firing, like over-firing. So, just from a simple little poke, if this neuron started to fire, it'd be like, what's going on? Like, my hand hurts. And well, no, it's just a pencil, Phil. Like, relax, dude. And so that's the purpose of the hyperpolarization. But yeah, I mean, you're going to want to obviously go through this, definitely, but, again, my purpose here is to point out some cool things and whatever, to get to talk about cool stuff. So ultimately, the action potential, very important to understand. As you go underneath that, there's sample questions and stuff that you'll want to do. What about when the neuron is not working? So, and of course, not just a single neuron, but basically we're having some trouble with our neurons, specifically our myelinated. You'll notice that this is a drawing, obviously, and there's the axon, right? And it's been myelinated. And I sure said that poorly, but you know what I meant. Also called the Schwann cell, which is interesting, but you need to know that that's the insulation, right? So it's going to go faster. With multiple sclerosis, it's a terrible disease, terrible. What's happening is the motor neurons specifically, but also sometimes the sensory neurons, but usually it's the motor neurons, the myelin sheath is degrading. It's getting thinner and thinner, and the neurons are going to have a harder and harder time to fire. Remember how I told you, as someone practices a sports skill or playing a musical instrument, the myelin gets thicker and thicker. They get better and better. I mean, man, if even if you don't like hockey or ever have seen hockey, you've got to watch Connor McDavid on a highlight, or Sidney Crosby. The skill is just out of this world. It doesn't matter if you know zero about even all sports. When you see how these people can move, your eyes will pop. You'll go, is that even possible for a human to move like that? So their myelin sheaths, they practice their skills thousands of hours, really thick, really strong, and basically they can just do it in their sleep. the terrible thing with MS is that the myelin sheath starts to degrade, and even just, kind of moving a hand to maybe pick up a pencil becomes difficult. And the many students in this course, your goal is to get into healthcare, and so this is part of that understanding. Like if someone tells you about their symptoms, now we're not trying to turn you into a doctor right off the bat for the course, or even a nurse and stuff, but it's always good to be able to do a bit of diagnosis, right? To kind of, if someone says, hey, I can't write my name anymore, or I suddenly it's really messy, and I was just trying to shake some salt yesterday, and I missed the plate, and that could be a sign of MS. I mean, there could be a sign of a lot of other things. Ultimately, it's a sign the person should go see the doctor quickly. But that's also part of this course, is giving you some sense of some of these symptoms, and again, to tie it all together in a system, right? And especially a system that you can relate to. You can relate. Some of you might know folks who've had this disease, or we can all empathize with folks, who get a terrible disease or whatever. That it's important. I mean, my gosh, if you're one of these people, how important would it be to understand your disease, right? And for family and friends to understand it. So it's always a good way. We'll do this throughout the course at certain points where we talk about a certain disease, especially actually unit 5, which is a ways away, all kinds of diseases that you're going to learn just a little bit about, but enough to kind of understand some of the basics of biology, right? So it's kind of cool. Of course, this is a terrible disease. So and yeah, as this progresses, the person really can no longer move, essentially. Because their ability to fire their motor neurons just isn't there, because a motor neuron should be your interneuron. Your brain should be able to talk to, say, my brain should be able to talk to my arm, and I should be able to move it, basically, right? So yeah, that's that one, kind of a downer to end it like that, but still, that's just a reality. Now, next part here is neuron to neuron communicate. Oh, I see a question. What does depolarization and repolarization mean? Now, that was a while ago. That's a great question. Ultimately, let me know, Joanne, if this answers it. If we look at this picture here, perhaps, I'm going to go to the right picture, because if one person has a question, like 4 others do, or 10 others do, you'll see this is the neuron at rest, Joanne. So if we depolarize, we change the polarity, we send in positive. This is the sodium ions flooding in. The sodium ions are positive, and they're flooding in right here. This right here is depolarization. You've changed it, right? If you look here, it's positive. If we look here, oh, it's negative. So it's changed. Does that help? That basically when I say, and maybe just even take the mic and let me know if that's kind of connecting how I'm describing that. And it's okay if it's not quite, you can tell me that too. But yeah, let me know if that kind of connects and you go, okay, I get it.
Yeah. It kind of makes sense. Just a little.
Yeah. Now, see, always the idea, and even if this is a live class where I teach every day, it's, hey, you guys got to read this tonight, watch the video, like. You never expect your brain just to take information and you just go, oh yeah, I get it. Oh, what about the next thing? Oh, I got that too. Like it does take time. I mean, how many of us run around the house yesterday or a week ago? Oh, let's talk about depolarization. This was probably one of the first times you've chatted all about depolarization, right? So it's a new word. So definitely look at it again. But yeah, ultimately, and thanks for the feedback too there, Joanne. Ultimately, what's going on is we're at rest. The sodium has been actively pumped out. In other words, the dominoes have been set up, and now those positive sodium ions come in. The charge changes. The neuron gets charged. A wave of charge follows through. A wave of depolarization. Then right behind, this is actually repolarization. The potassium ions, which are positive, are getting pumped out. And if you think about it, if you send potassium ions out of a cell, it's going to become negative inside. See, inside a neuron, in there, are literally giant negative proteins and negative molecules, so that they have a negative charge. And so they're stuck in there. They can never come out. They're just stuck. And so the neuron does it, it almost wants to naturally be negative. But because we add this sodium potassium pump, we give it this ability basically to set up a bunch of dominoes, or to set up a rubber band that can be. But yeah, that's the answer. The real answer to it is, go through the notes, watch. There's a teaching video my colleague Daryl's put together on here that's excellent. It's about 20 minutes. It'll really help too. Okay, feel free to always ask questions, as was just done. Pop them in the text chat. I'll try to keep my eye on it. We looked at the sodium flowing in, the depolarization, repolarization, potassium flowing out. Talked about MS. We were just chatting about neuron to neuron, because that action potential, so traveling down, well, there's not just one neuron, right? Like even in a reflex arc, there's going to be a sensory neuron, an interneuron, and then a motor neuron. So that's 3 neurons at least. In your brain, 86 billion neurons, which kind of makes sense. Even looking at a visual scene. So you're looking at me here on this computer screen. There's probably some keyboards and stuff, and there's stuff behind the computer screen. That's like, I don't know, millions of neurons are talking to each other. Okay, that's green. Okay, he's moving his hand. What they're actually doing, and this is why we can naturally do mathematics, we just have to train ourselves, we have to take courses, and we have to practice. Our brain is the most advanced calculator ever imagined, that will ever probably be. Maybe one day we'll invent something like a human brain. That's probably 100 years away, literally. Our brains, when we're seeing, when we're walking, when we're listening, our neurons are running just thousands of calculations to figure stuff out. And they're doing mathematics just without us knowing it, which is also really cool. But they have to talk to each other. That's what this point is about here. So the action potential, the nerve impulse comes, and we're down at the end. Now, this is small. Remember how I told you just how small a neuron is, right? Like one neuron, like 10 of them would fit across a hair strand, so you can't see them. This is like this tiny terminal here. This is the synaptic terminal. That's a super tiny area. They're going to send neurotransmitters. They're going to send chemicals from neuron to neuron. Now, one of them is acetylcholine. Now, the way acetylcholine works, and you can read about that as you read about the neurotransmitters, it's an excitatory. The way it works is it allows the next neuron to fire, or it allows one neuron to talk to another. Now, what happens with Alzheimer's is a person's neurons, and we're not sure how this happens, but it's a terrible, terrible disease, is for some reason they start producing less acetylcholine, so it becomes harder. And this is also a little bit part of becoming older, but Alzheimer's is really bad. It's worse than just normal cognitive decline of being old, right? And ultimately, when we're going neuron to neuron, we got to release some acetylcholine. But in Alzheimer's, there's not as much released, or the receptor neuron, the one that's got to pick up that acetylcholine, just doesn't recognize it, right? It becomes, for whatever reason, it's not able to go, oh, someone wants me to fire, because that's all neurons do. They make the next neuron fire, right? And they don't touch each other ever, but they send a chemical message. So with Alzheimer's, it's really critical that essentially the kinds of drugs that we've tried, and still really they don't work that well, frankly, but we try to either increase the amount of acetylcholine or even block, because for you and I, what happens in our brain, we're releasing acetylcholine all the time, but then there's special processes in there that break it down. Because if you think about it, if we filled our brain with acetylcholine, then all of our neurons would fire at once. It would be like worse than an epileptic seizure, right? Like it would just be an explosion in our head we couldn't do anything. And and again, that's how powerful these chemicals are in our body, right? Like we have incredibly powerful chemicals. So that acetylcholine, it gets released. It actually has to be broken down right away so that you don't have a storm happen in your mind. And again, with Alzheimer's, we actually give them drugs to block that breakdown, so that little bit of acetylcholine that they're releasing, that it stays, and that their neurons can talk to each other, and they can answer you, or they can remember what was happening 10 minutes ago. Unfortunately, my mother had that, and yeah, it was terrible, right? Like she couldn't remember stuff, and she wouldn't remember if you'd come back in the room and stuff, and yeah, it's not good. But again, the good thing about biology and medical treatments, they're getting better and better, and one day we'll have it figured out, right? We're going to figure out how to solve all this stuff, because it's the cool thing. It's a system. We just need to figure out how to work the system. So yeah, this is on the neurotransmitters. Acetylcholine is one. So we got, gonna see here. I got another slide, right? I want to go through, scroll down, go right here. Oh yeah, this is just a better picture. So we've got the end of the neuron here, and essentially we're releasing acetylcholine. We got a receptor. Again, they'll be received, and then this neuron will fire. This looks like it's actually, this might be a motor neuron, in fact, and it's going to fire off this muscle. That looks like what's happening here, actually. It might say above. I don't think it does, though, if I look at that quickly. So yeah, so this is what's actually going on right here. I'm pretty sure that's a motor neuron, and it's going to make this muscle twitch. It's going to make this muscle fiber contract. And that's just so cool. What happens if there's a lot of acetylcholine? So yeah, I think I alluded to that, but that's a great question. So right here, this is a junction. Say that, and let's say it's a motor neuron. I'm pretty sure what it is. It's a motor neuron, and it's going to cause this muscle to contract. If we released a lot of acetylcholine, too much, let's say, well then there'd be too much muscle contraction. Potentially you'd get a cramp. Potentially you get a muscle spasm. So you're trying to maybe do a real fine movement. Imagine, and people don't really do this job anymore, but imagine if you were trying to fix a watch, right? So it's really, really fine movement. But you just suddenly have a twitch, like you couldn't control what's happening. So essentially, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part. Does that help out? I'll say it again. So basically, right here, if you're releasing too much acetylcholine, it would cause this muscle to contract, but it would cause many others to contract. Or if it was between neuron and neuron, it wouldn't just be one neuron that would fire, it would be all of them. So there's my cat, hilarious. So for in your ears right now, and so you've got some sensory neurons in there picking up my cat. If too many of them fired, the cat would be so loud. She actually already is pretty loud, but she'd be even louder as she's mewing. Can't the contractions be controlled? Well, this would be an example of something that would be uncontrollable. I mean, ultimately, all of us have had that from time to time, either a muscle spasm or kind of a cramp. It could be caused by this. There's other reasons causing that. And sometimes notice how we're more sensitive to sound or more sensitive to light. Oh, you're just being really silly, eh, Cleo? Yeah, silly cat. And ultimately, this could explain it. The human body is quite complicated, though, so there's usually many other reasons. This is totally involuntary, though, what's happening. And normally this works really well. I mean, think of, and again, you might play musical instruments, or I'm sure you've watched musicians, right, and how exact what they're doing. So normally our body has no problem. I mean, think of what a human body can do, right? All of the different sports, dances, musical instruments, all of the things that are, I mean, even talking, how complicated it is, in all the languages we can speak. So normally things work super well. And usually the acetylcholine is released and it's broken down. So it's released, the next neuron uses it, and then it gets broken down, and it's all good. These are great questions, by the way, because you're trying to understand how the system works, and just keep asking them, and keep wondering about them while you're reading too, right? Because that tells your brain you're curious. One of my rules, if you like, is just be curious. If you're curious, you're set, literally. Like literally, you'll be set if you're curious. Now, if we build up and get enough neurons, we get one of these things. We get a pretty complicated system called the brain, right? So this is obviously the central nervous system, and or interneurons, right? These are all interneurons. And ultimately, you wanna make sure that you know the main four areas here. Frontal lobe. This is where you and I are. This is our executive center. This is where we're aware. And also, if a person seems to be suddenly less self-aware or is lacking control, especially impulse control, they might have something wrong or some challenge going on with their frontal lobe, because this is where it's called our executive, or really our self is. I've learned how we can essentially trick our neurons into thinking, well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, our brain is very willing to go along with us as long as we, really show what we believe, right? So, I mean, there's fantasy. So it's probably a fantasy for me to think that I might still make the NHL. But certainly I could at least believe that I could become better at hockey or a better skater, or, I could stick handle better. And if I believe that, well, then I take some action. I practice, right? But without the belief, why would I do anything, or why would I go mountain biking if I didn't enjoy it? But also, if I didn't like, I also like to get faster, right? Like I train, not a lot, but I get on my bike and try to go like heck because I believe I'm going to get better, and sometimes I do. So it seems to work. What are the adverse effects if we try to trick? You can't really trick that kind of. I mean, that's deep biochemistry. That's a great question, though. By the way, I mean, ultimately, this will just happen when we're using self-affirmation, or I mean, as a human. I mean, ultimately, we have choice, right? Like we are the ultimate. I mean, the poor little cat here, she's got some choice, but she's a cat. Humans, we can choose. We can choose what to believe. We can choose what to do. When we make a choice to do something, we can just about do anything we want to do, right? Like, within reason. Like, probably most of us here, if we're going to get into jogging, aren't going to end up in the Olympics, but you never know. There could be one or two students in a class, especially a class if there's about 100 people. There's one or two folks who actually probably could make the Olympic team if they said, hey, I'm going to do this, they could do it. And that's like millions and trillions of neurons, and you're convincing yourself, and then you're just getting into practice, and you're getting into habits of mind, and being a positive thinker. The whole frontal lobe, I mean, this is us. This is all our choice, right? We choose our destiny. We do. We make our, the universe can happen to you, or you can happen to the universe, right? Like it's always up to us. It's not easy, life, because we got to work our tails off, but it's all good in the end if we work our tail off. Okay, so what you want to make sure is understand these four areas. I mean, I'm not going to go through everything, obviously. The thing I like to point out, frontal lobe, like I've been talking about, temporal lobe. Well, this is hearing, right? Occipital lobe, back there, that's where vision, or that's where you can see stuff. It's why, and you definitely don't want to have that happen, but if you got bumped on the head hard enough back there, you would sometimes you would really see, like, you'd see like a spark, basically. And it would look like it was in front of you, but it's basically because, yeah, your brain bumped the back of your head and then basically stimulated a whole bunch of visual neurons, and you think you're seeing a big bright light. Well, it's because your brain just got moved around in your skull. It's also why you should wear helmets while you're biking. You don't have to wear them, walking out your door, but if you're on a bike, any kind of a bike, wear a helmet. Been noticing lots of folks getting out biking, more folks that I never saw before with the electric bikes, which is great. It's good. But they appear not to, some of the folks appear not to know how to bike so well, and a lot of them aren't wearing helmets. And you do not want your noodle. You want to keep your noodle safe. That's a good idea. It's a very important thingamajig, that brain of ours. Okay, so going on in our brain, there's obviously it's a lot of the the conscious nervous system there, but there's also the autonomic nervous system, right? The ANS, and couple key things here. Two key parts to the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, ultimately, this is if, and just look behind you and make sure, no, there's no giant bear. If a giant bear comes into your room, that's going to be the sympathetic nervous system. I mean, unless you're comfortable with giant bears, and sometimes I actually have students who are, so there could be a few hunters in the class, and they're kind of like, yeah, big deal. Because like my uncle was like that, he'd just go, yeah, just relax. Just say hi, bear, and walk away. Don't don't run away, and don't go bug the bear, but you don't have to panic. So for most of us, we would our heart rate would go through the roof. We would be ready to fight for our life, or probably most of us would try to run so fast, especially if it was a giant bear with really pointy teeth. We'd try to run so fast that we'd just like run into a wall, and then the bear would come over and we'd be passed out because we ran into a wall. So that's the fight or flight. Now, let's say you get out of the room, that you've run your tail off, and don't, by the way, do that. Do not run away from a bear. Just walk, relax. But anyway, in my pretend world where you're running your tail off, at some point you're going to have to rest and digest. So that's the parasympathetic system. You have to slow down at some point, like, because this is adrenaline. This is epinephrine is going to be the main it's a hormone that's going to be released. It's just going to be so powerful. And at some point, your body has to stop. It's amazing how long you can go if you had to, but at a certain point, you just essentially fall over. And, this is if you're essentially running for your life through the woods or something. You would eventually just fall over, and the parasympathetic system would take over, slow your heart rate down, and assuming that you had a chance to eat berries while you were running away from the bear, you would be digesting the berries that you had while you were running from the bear. So yeah, it's important to understand those two. I want to go over maybe a couple more things really, really quick. Obviously, make sure we understand the eye. And now I've gone over stuff really quick, so this is again just a quick overview. But understand the eye, how the eye works, and some of the key parts to that system, and the ear, which I think I got down here. Yes, the ear. I mean, ultimately, for both of those, actually, I'll put them side by side. Let me zoom out. What you're going to want to do is, what's the path that light travels, right? And know that. And, you'll want to study that. So, I mean, basically, okay, we're going to come in. I'm going to zoom in here in a second. Okay, come downstairs, go right there. Okay, so either what's the path that sound travels, or what's the path that light travels, right? So, okay, we're going to go through the lens, and then, we're going to go through the vitreous humor, but the main show is going to be back here on the retina, right? And there's rods and cones. So the cones are for colored light, and the rods are for basically black and white. The rods actually are peripheral vision as well, but they also help us see in the dark. So the cat's gone. I think you heard the cat. She's got way more rods than us, so she can see really well in the dark. She actually doesn't see color as well. It's kind of neat. Also, because of the shape of her eyes, I just learned this in a YouTube video, not from the course, but it was really cool. The shape of her eyes they're kind of shaped a bit different, is the way I'll put it. So if you put something like just a few inches in front of a cat, they actually can't see it, basically, which I was surprised. And yeah, it's just cool stuff like that you can always kind of add to your course. Watch a video on a cat or dog science. For the ear, auditory canal, tympanic membrane, then the ossicles. These are your smallest bones right here in your body. That's pretty cool, right? They're in your ear. And then this essentially hits the cochlea here. And essentially then it stimulates the auditory nerve. Knowing stuff like that, you could probably be asked stuff like that. Maybe that's a bit of a hint, especially about the ear thing. We've done our hour almost, so we got a few more minutes. So definitely let me know if there's questions. I'm probably going to shut the recording off just for those students who are watching by recording, so that they don't have to watch for more than I think it's been about 50 minutes for those folks. And but yeah, definitely let me know if you've got questions. I'm going to shut the recording down though, but we'll still be here. I'm still hanging out. I think I saw something on the text chat. Main message, yeah, enjoy the course. There's great information to learn. You can apply it to yourself. You can apply it to if you got kids, or if you've ever seen a kid, you can apply it to kids. You can apply it to health, family, and friends. And it works. Read through the material, do the practice questions, watch our videos. Anytime you need help or have a question, just shoot me an email. I'm still going to stay with the group here. I'm just going to stop the recording though, and I'll post this probably a little later online. It'll be available on the front page. Hit stop recording and go